next guest. We are joined with Esteban Carrillo. Esteban, there we are. Esteban is a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle. He was previously with Tele Sur English. Esteban, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
Hi, Jamal. I'm doing good. How are you? How is everything?
I am doing good. I am better that you are joining me. And of course, the big news, the ICC puts out an arrest warrant for Netanyahu and Gallant.
Yes.
And there was one other person that was on it from Hamas, but Israel keeps saying that that guy is dead. We don't know if he's dead as a flat fact, but at the very least, Hamas has been celebrating. I would argue the rest of the world has been celebrating this, considering the overwhelming majority of the world believe that these people are warmongers and war criminals. And what's wild about this also, you get Canada coming out saying we will abide by the arrest warrant. You get Joseph Borrell saying the European Union will abide by the arrest warrant. And of course, you get the US saying, well, we don't believe that Israel is committing war crimes.
Yeah,
so
we disagree.
We abide by it
strongly
at all.
disagree. Yeah.
Yeah. Give me your take on this. It's a good step from my point of view. Give me your thoughts.
It's a landmark. It's a historic step. This is the first time a sitting Western leader. Israel is a Western nation. Like, just look at the headlines. How they've been talking about the ICC. They talk about Israel as a Western nation. So it's the first time, and particularly a U.S. ally gets an arrest warrant, right, issued against them. The last time it happened with Vladimir Putin when Russia took out, I remember the number, but it was children, right, out of the war zone in Ukraine, took them to a safe zone in Russia. Arrest warrants were issued against him, and then the United States were very okay with it, right? They were saying international law
they loved it.
Needs to be upheld. We need to, they were calling on all countries to arrest Putin. Remember, he traveled to Africa, somewhere in Asia. He traveled somewhere in Asia. He was supposed to go to a BRIC summit in South Africa, and the United States was just like, you need to arrest him. He must be arrested. And now, Benjamin Netanyahu, arguably the modern history's worst war criminal by a long shot, I would say, gets the same arrest warrants issued against him. His former war chief, the defense minister, up until was last week, right? That he was. It was on the day of Trump's election, so maybe 2 weeks ago, that he gets canned. He's also named there, and as you say, Mohammed Deif, who is the military leader of the Qassam brigades of Hamas's armed wing and one of the masterminds of the October 7 Palestinian resistance attack that had been, from what we know at the Cradle, Mohammed Deif had been planning October 7 for at least 2 years.
Right.
Israel claims they had killed him, I think, in July or in August. They killed him in Gaza. There's been no confirmation of his actual death. Right. So the ICC kind of goes with the fact that we don't actually know if he's dead, so we're going to issue an arrest warrant against him. They would have issued one against Yahya Sinwar. We know he was killed in battles in Gaza. So, as I said, this is a landmark moment. And I think, we've been talking a lot, even for all the time that I've been talking to you, Jamal, we keep talking about how this is kind of a new chapter, right? A new step. We're seeing the fractures form in the old world order. I would say that yesterday is probably one of the biggest cracks that has formed, because you saw the response from essentially everyone in the world, right? To the Rome Statute, you have 124 signatories. Israel and the United States, not part of them. Ukraine recently signed on to the Rome Statute, so they are also, beholden to the rulings of the ICC. So now what the ICC says, right, is we call on all states that are signatories to the Rome Statute that gives us power to implement this order, to work for to arrest these war criminals, and including nations that are not signatories. They call on them to cooperate, to coordinate, right? And now you have the United States just going full rogue at this point. If we talked about Israel being a pariah state and a rogue state, the United States is exactly the same, right? They have lost.
I just interrupt you on this one.
Yeah,
the only thing that I have against this is that they didn't include Joe Biden,
Yes,
Anthony
Anthony
Blinken,
Blinken. Yeah.
yeah, Sullivan, Kirby, all of these. I mean, let's be honest. If they're saying that Netanyahu and Gallant are war criminals, okay, fair enough.
Yes.
They cannot do any of this without the U.S. political backing, money, and military backing.
This
Full
is
stop.
exactly, yes, I agree with you completely. This is an argument I was having yesterday. Exactly, I was saying the exact same thing. That if at this point, what separates Benjamin Netanyahu from Joe Biden, and what separates Yoav Gallant from Lloyd Austin, right? The defense minister, the defense secretary. They are essentially doing the same thing. They're working hand in hand. As you're saying, Israel couldn't have gotten away with a month, let's say, with a month of what is done without complete US support. The genocide in Gaza would have stopped very quickly if Israel didn't get the support from the United States. Everything that we have seen, all of the horrors, all of the destruction, all of the displacement, it's because United States officials like Joe Biden, like Blinken, like Austin, like, as you said, Sullivan, and Matthew Miller, Verdun Patel, Karine Saint-Pierre is one of the spokespeople, that all of them work in unison to whitewash war crimes and to fuel, right, and to continue sending weapons. Just this week, the Senate voted down a legislation to block a transfer of $20 billion worth of arms sales to Israel. The White House lobbying for this, the Pentagon, the State Department, all lobbying Congress people to vote against this bill. This has been a very, very bad week for the United States on the diplomatic level, because first you had that, right, the Senate vote. Then you had the shameful vote at the UN, where the United States is the only nation out of 15 members of the Security Council to say, no, we oppose, we veto an immediate Gaza ceasefire, claiming that the wording of the document did not include something or other about the captives. France has to come out and say, that's not true. It did actually include it.
Yeah, it's humiliating.
Yeah, and now this, right? What we were discussing, the ICC.
Ends up raising his hand. Every other country, including the UK, like, think about it. When even the UK is like, yes, this is a war crime. We need to stop the genocide.
We just
the
need to
only
stop
guy,
exactly.
This lunatic, this sociopath that they have raising his hand, effectively saying, no, we disagree with the ceasefire. In fact, I was trying to find his quote, his comment, because the comment is outrageous. He's effectively saying no other country has worked as tirelessly as the U.S. Right here, this. I'm going to play this clip.
We have also done more than anyone to work with the government of Israel in an effort to minimize civilian harm over the course of the conflict. The United States also, over the course of the past year, has done more than any other country to take tangible steps to improve the humanitarian conditions in Gaza, even as the situation remains dire. We have also done more than anyone to work with the government of Israel in an effort to minimize civilian harm over the course of the conflict. The United States also, over the course of the past year, has done more than any other country to take tangible steps to improve the humanitarian conditions in Gaza, even as the situation remains dire.
I can't hear you, Jamal.
Think about that. You spend about $30 billion in order to allow a genocide, not just in Gaza, but also to expand that genocide into Lebanon. And you still have the stones to look at the world in the face and say, we have done everything in our power to help stop this war.
We have done more than most. He says we have done more than anyone.
Yeah, more than anyone, more than any other actor to stop this. Despite the fact that 70 and more than 70% of it is funded by us. Like, that is amazing to me that he can sit there and look the world in the face and say something like that. Just astonished.
These people redefine, the meaning of cynicism. These people redefine the meaning of not having any blood in your face, of just being such I have no words at this point. I have no words because it defies logic. It defies, like even on a human level, right?
Yeah.
Like how dare you? How dare you say these things when we are all witnessing what is happening in Gaza, right? Like the people that are joining us, the people that are watching right now, they don't need to be watching this show to know what's happening in Gaza. They don't need to be watching, RT or reading the Cradle or whatever, right? Like they don't need to. It's everywhere. It's constant. It's prevalent. It's been happening for a year, non-stop, no changes. What is he talking about to minimize civilian harm? Like how? Where?
I have
Where
no
are the
idea
results?
how.
Like, are you this bad? Are you guys just admitting that you are really this terrible at your job? That we're seeing the massacres committed, not just in Gaza anymore, right? In Lebanon as well. In Lebanon, the situation incredibly dire. But no, the United States, right? We are working tirelessly, and we are this, and we are that. The United States has zero credibility anymore, right? They've lost it. They've lost it a while ago. Now, at this point, we're just kind of going over the same idea. This is the fractures that we're seeing, right? You were saying earlier, like how partners like the UK or Canada are saying we will. Even their responses
They
were.
abide by it.
Yeah, they weren't like like the Netherlands, right? The home of the Hague, the home of the ICC. They said it like they were the first to come out and say we will enforce the arrest warrants if Israeli leaders come. They were like unequivocal. They were like, we will do it. But then you had, partners. You had the UK, you had Canada coming out and saying we respect the independence of the court, and they never say we will abide by the ruling, but they say they make it known, that they are not going to be like the United States and just like blast it and claim that it has absolutely no legal. Even Borrell, right, the keeper of the European garden, comes out and said that the decisions are binding.
The keeper of the European Guard. Right.
I'll never forget that. But who else was it that came out and said Germany? Germany took almost a day. They just like a few hours ago, they just put out a statement saying that I forget what it was, but they said like they're gonna study it. Right? They are very careful about what they say because Germany, so probably only second to the U.S. in supporting this genocide. Right, in supporting Israel's right to self-defense, which includes, bombing hospitals and killing children, and etc. France gives out a statement at first saying that they respect the ICC and blah blah blah. But then a few hours ago, they also put out a second statement saying we were going to study with our partners. They talk a lot about this, right? We're going to study with our partners about what the response would be. So at this point, I think and Benjamin Netanyahu, Gallant, if they travel to the UK, if they travel to Germany, if they travel to France, Italy, I would say that, probably nothing's going to happen. Question is, what happens when they travel somewhere else, right? Remember when Netanyahu went to the UN, right? His last trip to New York, when he went to the UN, the plane, the Israeli presidential plane, they had to fly it at minimum weight, at minimum capacity, because they were not willing to stop anywhere. They were not willing to stop in any European airport because of the ICC arrest warrants, because the Israelis are concerned about the ICC warrant. This is why you've seen all of these lobbying efforts and threats of sanctions, which were repeated yesterday. Lindsey Graham comes out, and the other guy, Tom Cotton, comes out and says, like, hey, remember, we can actually invade the Netherlands, so be careful about your ruling.
Well, we have the Invade the Hague Act that was put in under George Bush, that if any U.S. service member, or for that matter, any ally of the U.S., they can basically militarily attack, I imagine,
the Netherlands,
in order to get them out.
Yeah.
I'm curious from your take, like, what does this mean that the U.S., with all of the diplomatic muscle that it has at its disposal? I mean, for God's sake, the arrest warrant for Putin was outrageous. Russia's not party to the Rome Statute. Ukraine wasn't party to the Rome Statute. Yeah. The U.S. is not party to the Rome Statute, meaning none of the participants in the conflict were party to the Rome Statute. Mm-hmm. Gaza is.
Palestine is. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And to make it even worse, Putin was removing kids out of a war zone. And they said, and I remember I was in an argument with a guy, and I was like, so what should he have done? Leave the kids in the war zone? And he's like, it's war. I was like, oh, so you're advocating killing kids? No, I'm not advocating for killing kids. Okay, so what should he have done with the kids? And they used that to say that he was kidnapping children. Just outrageous nonsense. But I guess my point is, what does it mean that the U.S. did not have the diplomatic muscle to stop this from going through. They still pushed it through. I mean, I think if anything, it gets across how angry the rest of the world is.
How fed up, exactly,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
Exactly, you're right. Because, well, I think the diplomatic muscle allowed them to delay it for very long. Because Karim Khan, the ICC prosecutor, he was talking about this, I think, in April, right? Like it's been a while at this point since they first brought it up. So of course, it's because of these threats, the constant threats, and like he was saying in an interview that he had been actually contacted directly by Western governments, telling him, don't you dare issue these arrest warrants. But as you are saying, the situation in Gaza and in Lebanon is becoming so unavoidable, so difficult, so dire that you can't just simply like pretend like it's not happening anymore, right? Like you can, like the United States obviously can, and they will to the very end. But besides them, the rest of the world, they also fear repercussion, right? It was The Guardian. They had this article yesterday talking about the arrest warrants, and they were talking about how Netanyahu and Gallant, nothing is likely going to happen to them, but that the stench of being not just called, but like branded a war criminal by the world's top court, the world's top criminal court. You can never go back from that. You can never, ever go back from that. And this is also a problem for Israel, right? Because the Israeli society, at this point, what they're likely going to do is rally around Netanyahu, right? Because what was the response?
They already are.
Yeah, what was the response from Israel yesterday? All of the officials, not just government officials, but also opposition officials, anti-Semitism. It's anti-Semitism. It's because they hate the Jews. It's this and that. It's always like that. That's it. There's no more argument. There's no more anything, right? Everything encapsulates into ICC is Hamas.
I was trying to find, actually, the cradle that I had up when I was reading this on. To your point, I must have gotten rid of the article. But you're right. All of the comments were, oh, this is blood libel. This is, they just hate Israel. They're all anti-Semitic. The entire EU is apparently all these countries are just anti-Semitic. No, you're right. They did not accept this as if they were doing anything wrong. They accepted this as if they were just being persecuted just because. And it's like, dude, you have killed like 30,000 children. How are you looking at this thinking this is just fair game and thinking that everybody just hates you because you are Jewish or something? It's utter nonsense. Yeah, they don't seem to be taking this with the gravity it deserves. I guess my question is, what does it mean? And here we are. This is the Cradle reporting on it. And the Cradle, thankfully, went through and gave kind of all of this commentary that they were making in Israel. And right here, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office, quote, the ICC is anti-Semitic. Israel rejects ridiculous and false charges against it, unquote. President Isaac Herzog, quote, this is a dark day for justice and a dark day for humanity. Think about that. You're in the middle of a genocide and you're arguing this is a dark day because they're calling
today is the dark day, right? Today darkness arrives.
Not the entire last of this year. Foreign Minister Gideon Starr, this is an attack on the most threatened and targeted nation in the world. Also, the only country in the nation in the region that openly called for and acted against by other nations seeking its elimination. Oh, we're always the victim in this situation. Minister of National Security, Ben Gvir. Ben Gvir is a lunatic by anybody's standards. Gvir, the answer to the arrest warrant applies sovereignty over all of the territories of the West Bank, settlements in parts of the country, and severing ties with the terrorist authority, including sanctions, unquote. I want to get into that for a moment. The West Bank.
Yes.
So Seymour Hersh came out, I believe this was day before yesterday.
Yes.
And pointed out that the objective, damn it, I screwed up. Let me do this a little bit differently. But pointed out that the objective was to annex the West Bank. That effectively his goal is to take it all. And I don't know if he's thinking this because Donald Trump is in office. To be honest with you, though, even under Joe Biden, I don't think Joe Biden would have said anything against it per se, all things being equal. Ray, this is the commentary. Thank you for the cradle for doing so. This is your outlet. I don't think Joe Biden would have done anything either, even if this came out under a Joe Biden. Well, it is under Joe Biden. But it's, I suppose, Donald Trump wins and he believes Trump is going to give us everything that we want. Mary Ann Adelson gave him $100 million in order to annex the West Bank. He's in office. He put in lunatics that are Israel
one worse than the other.
Yeah, so he's probably likely going to do it. So yes, we're announcing that we're going to take the West Bank.
Yeah, I mean the situation with the West Bank, it's first of all being completely underreported, and second of all, it's getting worse by the moment, right? I think in this period, I think Simon Hirsch reporting. It's pretty. I mean, it's just kind of like it's the writing on the wall. This is what Israeli officials have been talking about since they came to power. Remember, this government has been in power since December 2022,
right?
And since they came to power, they gave the de facto governorship, in a way, of the West Bank to Bezalel Smotrich, which is a member. He's first of all an illegal West Bank settler. Second of all, he's allied with these extremist settler organizations that at one point, remember, Jamal, they were organizing boat tours to go see the destruction in Gaza. Allied with them. Ben-Gvir, same thing. So what happened with the ICC thing, and what has been happening in general, right, is that when Israel gets faced with the reality of what it's doing, they double down, right? Netanyahu said it in a speech earlier this week. He said, Joe Biden kept telling me, don't go into Rafah, don't go into Khan Yunis, don't do this, don't do that. And we did all of those things, and we faced no repercussions. He was gloating. He was gloating, Netanyahu, in a speech in front of the Knesset. So now the ICC comes out and gives the arrest warrants. What does the government do? A few hours ago, the new defense minister, Israel Katz, he issues an order to stop administrative detention of illegal West Bank settlers. A measure that by itself was not very much used, right? Because whenever a crime is committed in the West Bank, if it's Jewish settlers, nothing happens. If it's
not just real quick, not just nothing happens. Oftentimes the military is there backing up the settlers.
It's overseeing it, right? Yeah. Like when remember when they were calling the pogrom in Amsterdam, when like all of these rowdy, abusive Israeli football fans were beat up. Pogroms are actually happening in the West Bank on an almost weekly basis, if not more often. Like Jewish pogroms are happening in the West Bank, like they're burning up Palestinian villages non-stop under the supervision of the army. So by lifting these, this legal measure that was present, that should have been used, they are paving the way for annexation. They're deploying more troops to the West Bank. They are expanding their hold. They want to annex it in one swift move. Just take it all entirely. But what does that mean?
On the ground.
Exactly. That means that what we've been seeing in Gaza is gonna repeat itself in the West Bank, where there's more Palestinians, when there's a bigger population of Palestinians who still, despite everything, manage to live in these, like small pieces of land that have been left for them. And this is more than anything. I mean, first of all, it's land grab, right? It's land theft. This is what they're doing. But second of all, it's to eliminate even the thought to discuss a two-state solution, even the slightest possibility. Because, when Biden or whoever, in the West comes out and talks about the two-state solution, it is as empty rhetoric as can exist, because Israelis, government and opposition, would not accept a two-state solution. They voted in the Knesset earlier this year to ban the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. So by annexing the West Bank, they just want to finally put the final stake in this idea, because to them, all of this land is theirs, right? And it doesn't matter at what cost it comes, because they also want to get rid of the Palestinians. Let's be honest. There's no way to argue against that at this point. And what are they doing in the south of Lebanon? They're doing the same. They're talking about treating the south of Lebanon like Area A of the West Bank, which is essentially freedom, military freedom to do as they wish, to set up, the separation walls that they love so much, and to take the land. Right.
You know, I had the opportunity to talk to somebody that was in the West Bank on the show. That was the beauty of, you know, working on the radio station, right? You had access to the various people. And I remember the guy called in and he had just been beaten up. He apparently they've taken his house. They had injured one of his friends, like, meaning he was pointing out how on a daily basis they were either under attack or assault, and that the military would just stand there watching and would only get involved if the Palestinian responded. So they basically had military backing as they went through, kill, injured, beat, stole property and houses. Just astonishing stuff.
Exactly.
Last question before I let you go. What do they intend for the Palestinian population if they annex the area? Because, you know, the wild part is when you're talking to people like Israelis, they would say, well, we don't believe in a Palestinian state. Okay, then if you don't want a Palestinian state, what about everybody living in one state? And they would say, well, that's not Israel because there are more Palestinians than Israelis. It's like, okay, so what do you want then? And the truth be told, if they're going to annex the West Bank, that's the situation they're going to get. So you're going to have a large Palestinian population living under an Israeli state. How is that going to work? So what is this, just rank apartheid in fact? Like, meaning not just de facto apartheid, but actual apartheid, which is something that you would have to have under this model. Or are they talking about expulsion? And if so, expulsion to where? Like, meaning what is the practical result of annexing the West Bank?
The practical, I mean, like you mean in regards to the Palestinian population, you know?
Yeah.
It's likely displacement. It's likely displacement, first of all, to the Negev, to the desert, to camps. You know, this is what they're talking about in Gaza, right? I think like the thing is like everything they're doing in Gaza, first of all, it was forewarned. None of what's happening in Gaza is like a surprise, right? Like, oh my God, like where did they come up with this idea? They've been talking about it since. If you've been paying attention since October 7, they've been talking about it since October 7. If you were paying attention before, then you know they've been talking about it for a while. So what they're doing in Gaza is, first of all, get rid of as much people as possible. You know, like this is why they, you know, when they bomb a tent camp or refugees and etc., they wait, you know, for their target to be in a populated area before striking. This is why they don't let humanitarian aid in. You know, today Gaza doctors are talking about a super bacteria that is immune to antibiotics. That they're finding bacteria, but E. coli. They're finding E. coli in the bones of victims. Right, something that has unheard of in medical science up until the situation in Gaza. So this is all at ethnic cleansing. Right, this is ethnic cleansing 101. So in the West Bank, once they come in force and start like pushing against the Palestinians, and they want to, you know, raise Jenin to the ground or Nablus or any of these towns and villages and refugee camps, you're going to see resistance. You're going to see, as you are already seeing, the resistance is active and fighting in the West Bank as they are in Gaza. So with more reason, the Israelis are just going to take the Gaza plan, you know, the Gaza doctrine. They're just going to move it to the West Bank. And with U.S. weapons, with U.S. approval, they're going to ethnically cleanse the West Bank. And then whoever's left, whoever survives, will be pushed into these concentration camps, just as they're doing in Gaza. And just as they will likely seek to do in South Lebanon, if Hezbollah were not there.
Outrageous. Esteban, man, thank you for this. I mean, great rundown of what's going on. And yeah, it is hard to wrap my head around this. I mean, I was talking to Laith Ruth, and he was talking about how like drones were flying overhead as they were doing the interview and stuff like that. Like basically that's just a daily part of life in Lebanon right now. Esteban Carrillo, he's a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle. He was previously with Telesur English and is a friend of this show, man. Thank you for this, Esteban.
Thank you, Jamar. I'll talk to you next time.
Absolutely. All right. We have come to the end of the show. I want to thank all